Hi, this is Jennie Walker, and welcome to Closet Conversations. Today I'm going to review episode 7, season 1 of the Netflix series GirlBoss. GirlBoss is based on the book by the same name, written by author Sophia Amoruso, and the book is about her rise to fame and wealth and success as the founder of Nasty Gal Vintage on eBay, which eventually rose to be a $100 million company with venture funding. We all know about Nasty Gal, and this story is fantastic to see how she started at the age of 23 and built this empire. And as resellers, I'm continually fascinated by the story because of all the great things that she did that are as relevant in today's environment as they were then. So, reviewing this episode, and this has got to be one of my favorite episodes. So, if you've been listening to the 6 podcasts before this one, we see Sophia's character, and she's, come a long way by the episode 7. She's come a long way, and she's finally in this episode kind of in her groove now because she's full-time focused on her business now, and we are seeing the results of all of this hard work paying off. So at the beginning of this episode, we see Sophia dressed in vintage clothing, a 1970s denim jumpsuit with vintage leather bag, and she is getting cash out of the ATM, and a lot of it, a big old wad of cash. And so we then see her walking across the street and, heading to wherever her destination is. And in the next scene, we see that she is at a theater that has gone out of business. And the theater is selling their costumes, and she is there with her U-Haul, buying the entire lot of costumes from this theater company, and she's handing a big wad of cash to the theater company owner. And so this is a great scene because what we've learned as she's gone full time is that she is now out finding creative ways to get a lot of vintage at one time. So buying out an entire costume section of a theater that's going out of business is, pretty genius. And so we see her taking the whole lot, including crazy costumes, like some that they showed were like things you might see at Disney World with giant heads of bears and things like that. So it gives you a idea that it's just easier for her to buy everything and pay cash for it. So as she's getting into her U-Haul and she's walking with a lot of pride, a lot of confidence, we see all these sale notifications on eBay of things that have just sold like $300, $200, $400, and it's like thousands of dollars worth of sales in just this one moment when she's getting into her car. And so it's pretty impressive because you get that feel that she's in her groove, things are going great, she's happy, money's flowing, sales are happening, and it's great. So she gets in her U-Haul and she drives off. The next scene, we see her in her apartment, and as she's walking into her apartment, she gets a text from her best friend Annie who says, "Oh my gosh, you're famous. Go check out Daily Candy." Now, we know Daily Candy is one of the pages she was following on MySpace. And so here it's popped up again. So Sophia runs to her laptop, types in dailycandy.com, and opens it up, and there it is, this huge article on her being recommended by Daily Candy. And apparently some of the people who write for Daily Candy have been buying from her vintage. And so she is just, it's thrilling to watch. She's so excited, and she's doing high fives with herself and jumping around, and in it, because Daily Candy's very tongue-in-cheek, they said they're in love with me, LOUVE, to be kind of cute. And so she's just having a moment, and it's just delightful to see that all that hard work had paid off, and that we're noticing that this quote and this bump of press by something as big as Daily Candy, and in its day, and I lived through the Daily Candy era, was a really big deal. It was, all the trends and really cool and breaking moment, the latest kinds of fashion things going on. So the fact that she made that is just amazing. And so this is definitely helping to take her to the next level. And so she's reading all of it, and then she looks below the article, And she reads the comment section, and oh my gosh, the bad reviews. She's like, oh my gosh, stunned. And so the next moment she's rushing into the bookstore to meet her friend Annie because she's got some of these reviews printed out. And she storms in and gets with her friend Annie, and she's like all fussing because she can't believe that here it is. She had this moment where all the spotlight is on her, and then there's all the criticism too. And she's sitting there and she's looking to her friend Annie, and she's like, listen to this quote from Beth Loves Yarn. Just hilarious, because all of the traditional vintage is just completely juxtaposed to everything Nasty Gal is about. She's edgy, she's young, she's like grunge, she's new wave, I don't know. She's just young, vibrant, hip, hot, edgy, all of those things, the complete opposite of what you would imagine for traditional vintage. And so this is who she is. And so it's not surprising that traditional vintage would object to what she's doing or not understand it. So I love very much that Beth Loves Yarn is the person's handle on the criticism. So she's fussy. She says, I get a little attention because I've been, she says, quote, smoking all the chumps. And then I get attacked for it, meaning chumps, meaning all the traditional vintage sellers. And her friend Annie says, look, she says, these attacks are good. It means you're doing something good, that you're doing something relevant. Sophia's like, yeah, but some of these things are just flat out lies, And I think as you get into anything to do with the internet and being commended in an article, and then you have all the places for people to comment, you're always going to have haters. Just going to happen. If you're new at that, it's very shocking to have haters, right? And so she's taking offense that they're lying, not that they don't like what she's doing, but that they're lying about it. And so this one, she reads this quote from a reviewer or critique from someone called Frederick from Remembrances, which, again, Remembrances is one of those traditional vintage names. And it says, she might be having a moment, but will never match the eBay success of a true vintage seller like Remembrances. So that's hilarious. And she's like, I outsell Remembrances all day long, every day. And she goes on to their site because she's angry. She gets her laptop up. She goes on to Remembrances eBay store and she goes, look at these, she calls them, quote, I'm quoting, long ass pants, unquote. She goes, here she's like they're wool pants and from the 30s, and the woman's trying to sell them, and it's like summertime, and she says, why would somebody be selling something like this time of year? And so she goes, you know what? And she gets this look in her eye, and she's like, I'm going to buy those pants. And so she buys those pants for the buy it now price of $50, and she turns them into shorts. And so you have these really adorable high-waisted vintage shorts instead of these long wool pants. And she puts them on eBay, and then she ends up selling them for $150. So she bought them for $50. She sold them for $150 after she altered them. And we know from previous episodes that she likes to transform vintage into something modern, like alter it. That's kind of her shtick. And so she's done that with these pants. And so in the next scene, she's at home eating a little dinner, and then she gets a knock on her door. She opens it up, and there's this woman there. The actress, I have to tell you, this actress is Melanie Jane Linsky. And as soon as I saw her in this series, I'm like, I knew I recognized her, but couldn't remember from what. But she is a New Zealand actress, but her claim to fame, where she really got noticed, was she played Rose in the TV series called 2.5 Men during the Charlie Sheen years. And I remember that she was like this really awkward neighbor girl or girlfriend girl. She was so memorable. And that was the role where she broke out. She was also in Sweet Home Alabama. I think she's the the one who played the high school friend who, quote unquote, brought a baby in a bar, unquote, to Reese Witherspoon's character. And then, of course, my other favorite is she was in that movie Ever After with Drew Barrymore, and she played one of the wicked stepsisters, but she wasn't really wicked, with the dark hair. So you've seen her, and she's excellent in this role as this frumpy vintage seller. So we see this character Gail at the door, and she's totally, I mean, the costume people get awards for this, like totally frumpy in like a pale blue cotton skirt and a pale blue sweater with embroidered flowers, and then this very conservative cotton twill Oxford shirt underneath, and very sensible flat sneaker shoes, and her hair is very plain, no makeup. And if you know her character, she has a very like everyday kind of average kind of look, and so they're really playing her up to be super frumpy. Although if you look at her on IMDb, she's really quite a beautiful woman, but they've done a great job at making her look frumpy. And so anyway, so she's at the door and she's like, oh, hey, do you remember me? And she's like, what do you mean, do I remember you? She's like, yeah. She says, I'm the owner of Remembrances. And she says, I don't know if you remember. She goes, oh, I remember you. She says, yeah, I bought some shorts from you. And she goes, Gail, she's like, Gail, she says, customer service skills are astounding, but not physically responsible. Which is hilarious, like that she would come all that way. She apparently had come from Reno. And she's like, yeah, basically I remember you. So Gail says, well, you mean these shorts? So she pulls the shorts out of her bag. So as it turns out, Gail was the person who bought the shorts for $150 after Sophia had bought them from her and altered them. It's hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. And so she is very shocked by that because the player has been played at this point. And so it's so funny watching these two interact because they're so opposite. So Gail makes her way into her apartment and looks around, and she's like checking out everything. And she's like, so this is where all the cutting and desecrating of the vintage takes place. So we learned that that's her shtick. That's her thing. That Gail is a vintage preservationist, and her thing is she doesn't think the clothes should be cut and ruined, that they should be protected and preserved in their original state. So that's part of the reason she's upset with her. So we see Gail trying to take a seat for herself. And so she picks up this vintage blouse, like from the 70s, off a chair. And she's like, oh, hello, you. She starts talking to the shirt. And Sophia's like, what is this lady's deal? She's talking to my clothes. And so she sits down, basically says to her, I'm a person who believes in things should be handled face to face. And the writers are so funny. Sophia's character goes, well, that's very interesting for an online seller. So anyway, Gail says, hey, you familiar with the Vintage Fashion Forum? She says, we pride ourselves on preserving and protecting vintage clothes, and we feel what you do violates our personal code of ethics. And so Sophia's like rolling her eyes. She's like, okay, fine. What's the fine I have to pay? Do I have to polish up an old telescope? And then Gail gets very serious and she says, you went too far. She said, you should never have cut those pants. What you should have done if it was one of a kind is use it as a pattern. Use it as a pattern and then make a new pair and put the original in an acid-free paper and in a box to save for future generations to enjoy. And Gail is very earnest in how she says all this, and Sophia's just looking at her like she has lost it. And she's like, well, no one would do that. And she says, well, I do. She says, well, you shouldn't. And right here is a really important moment, that these are two eBay sellers that have a completely different motivation about vintage. They come at it from two different directions. Sophia's like, let's make old modern and new and change it up and make it relevant, and let's make it something for now. And this other character, Gail, is like, oh no, she's all about preserving history, almost like a vintage historian, like someone who might work at like the Costume Institute. So they're both selling vintage, but their reasons are very different. How they think about vintage is very different. So that's very key, very different motivations. And I think that's important because all of us as resellers have completely different motivations for how we sell and what we sell and why and what it means to us. And there's so many spillovers in that, but just think about it. You have your own way of thinking about what you're doing, how that feels to you, what's important to you. And that's the uniqueness of individuals. And we all have access to the same platform on eBay. We all have access to sourcing product, and we all have access to building our marketplace. And so what Nasty Gal has done is built her own unique set of customers who want what she has. They don't want what Gail has at Remembrances. Those are completely different customers. And so that's very, very important. So Gail basically warns her, you really need to do better or you will make the forum angry. And Sophia's not buying it. And she's like, I think you just got pissed because I sold those shorts for 3 times what you got. She says, no, it's not about business. You're erasing history. And Sophia's like, oh no, this is business. So Gail gets up, I disagree. And she takes the blouse that was in her lap and sets it back down on the chair and talks to the blouse and says, good luck to you. It's hilarious. She looks at Sophia and she goes, you really are a B word that people said in the in the comments, bitch. She goes, you're just not old enough to understand and I feel sorry for you. And then she just walks out of her apartment. Sophia sits there and she's like, oh no, this chick isn't just going to walk into my apartment and dump all over my business. And so she gets up and runs to the door and yells, Gail. And then Gail is literally right there. Gail hadn't moved and had not gone down the hall. And she had been tying her shoe. And she's like, Gail, you just can't come in here and dump on my business like this. Of course, she used a more colorful word than that. But, you get the picture. And goes, you don't know anything about me. And then Gail looks at her and she's like, well, I think the best way to get to know somebody and find out about them is to hear their story. So why don't you tell me yours? And Sophia goes, I'll show you instead. So this is hilarious. So she takes Gail to her local dive bar, where the same bar where Annie's boyfriend is the bartender. And they go in there and it's just jammed with people and lots of young people in their 20s and up, and loud music, your typical bar, sticky, how you walk on the floor and it's sticky and all that, is that kind of thing. So they go in there and Sophia and Gail are kind of standing in a corner, and Sophia starts pointing out who her customers are. And she's like, you see that girl over there? She's totally cool. I can guarantee you she's a customer. And it'd be somebody who's a young woman wearing something very edgy. And then she's like, you see that woman over there? She's a customer. You see this woman over here who thinks she's Janet Jackson and is wearing that kimono? She says, I'll bet you she's one of my customers too. She's like, Gail, you're trying to preserve old memories and I'm here helping women make new ones. So all of these women she's pointing out are in what you'd call modern vintage, like where it's been repurposed or cut up or redone for today. Then Gail makes a joke back, and she says, they were talking about the girl who looked like Janet Jackson, and she goes, oh, well, you mean Miss Jackson, if you're nasty, Gal, which is hilarious. And Sophia goes, Gail made a joke. And so in that moment, tension's lessened. They go to the bar, they get some shots, and then Gail orders Patron Silver, which is, surprises the bartender because she doesn't look like she would drink, much less drink a shot. She's like, well, I said I didn't go to bars. I said I didn't drink home alone. And Sophia's like, you're an enigma. So anyway, so Gail starts dancing very awkwardly, if dancing can be frumpy, she figured it out. She basically was dancing with her arms out and spinning in circles. It's pretty funny. Anyway, so they basically dance, have a good time, and then they leave the bar. And as they're leaving the bar, Gail spots across the way or the road a vintage store and sees a dress in the window. And she's like, oh my gosh. And so she runs up to the dress, and Sophia's like running after her. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is a 1940s debutante dream straight out of Bonwit Teller. What I wouldn't give to keep this dress packed up in a box for all eternity. And, it just so happens that Gail has gone to a store that is the store that Sophia has her friend there, Mobius. He's the one that she bought that original $9 East-West vintage jacket from and has been flipping, whatever. So anyway, he comes down, and actually I missed a part. Oh my gosh. So earlier in the scene where we had seen, I said that she was very confident and having fun. She had gone after the U-Haul to this store, to Mobius's store. She put money in his pocket, and he says, okay, based on our agreement, you have 10 minutes to look through the bags before any other customer. So she had developed the relationship, and I'm so sorry I didn't say it in order. She developed her relationship with Mobius so well, she would pay him a small fee, we don't know how much because we didn't get to see, for the ability to go through what had been donated first. And that is a really key important point about how she was getting her inventory, how she developed relationships, how she was able to get some good stuff. So that had happened earlier in the episode. I forgot to mention it. So now she knows him so well, she feels like she can call him in the middle of the night. He comes down, opens the store, and so Gail is surprised that she's going to be able to go in there and see that dress. So they go in, and he takes the dress off the mannequin, and she's admiring in the window, and she's fantasizing about this story and creating this story of who this woman would be who would have owned this dress. And of course, the woman, she gave her a name. She called her Violet Rothschild. And she had this whole story that she tells and about her buying the dress, and her love interest is away at the war, but then he comes back for the war and greets him in the dress, and they live happily ever after, whatever. And Mobius is like, an evocative tale of yesteryear. And so anyway, she looks at him and says, will you take $300 for the dress? And I thought this was so fascinating because they're selling things in there for $12, we learned. So she's making him an offer without even seeing a price. That's a lot of money for an old dress like that. You would expect it to be like $20 or something in that store. But he said, I won't take $300, but I'll take $2. And I thought that was really cool because he knew she'd offered too much. He knew that she loved it and was very passionate about it. And so they kind of bonded over that. So anyway, in the next scene, they're back at her apartment. They're eating ice cream and just sort of having a good time, and Gail's like, they're just bonding, and it's very quiet, and Gail's like, yeah, I have 600 episodes of People's Court on tape, which is hilarious. So Sophia's basically had gotten a text from her boyfriend, and so she just mentions that she has this guy, and she says, oh, you're getting kind of personal. I thought you were all business. And she goes, well, no, not always. But she says, Gail, I don't understand you. You don't even want people to wear the clothes. And this is a different point. Another point between the two of them is that Gail is a preservationist, and Sophia's like, you don't even want people to wear them. Like, in other words, it's one thing to be like, don't cut up the clothes and wear them. But this is, don't cut up the clothes and put them in a box to never be worn again and just stare at them. So, two different things. And so Gail says, well, sometimes clothes are all we have. And then Gail opens up about her mother. And then you realize why Gail is the way she is. And this is where the series will kind of goes into these deep, dark places every now and then. But it's important to paint a picture. It's important to understand what motivates people. And so why is it that Gail is so hung up on people not wearing these clothes? So it turns out that her mother died when she was a baby, and she got to know her mother through the clothes in her closet. And she would always ask her dad, do you remember where she wore it or what was her favorite and things like that. And she said that she would start making up stories about her mother wearing the clothes, and that she could still has the smell of her mother in some of the clothes because she packed them in acid-free paper and put them in a box. And that was a tip for Sophia to do that, which Sophia didn't know anything about. And so after this moment, Sophia was very quiet, and she opens up that her mother wasn't around either, that she left when she was 12 and took all her clothes with her. That's so interesting. So clothes to Sophia do not have this emotional attachment. She didn't play in her mother's closet. So it's very interesting. They both have different motivations. They both have a different history with clothes, and they're painting this picture. The reason Gail is back at her apartment is she doesn't want her to get the overnight bus in the middle of the night, so she lets her kind of stay there on the couch. So in the morning when she wakes up, Gail has left the debutante dress behind with a sweet little note that says, "Thanks for the new memories, and I want you to have this." So the next scene we see Sophia walking down the street. She's got a bag from Michael's with her. And then, again, I've watched this thing like 10 times. I didn't notice it was a Michael's bag the first 5 times. But anyway, she has a Michael's bag, and then she gets back to her apartment, and we see her with this box, and she's putting the paper in very gently, the acid-free paper. You see this vintage debutante dress on the side that she's about to put in there. And just as she's overcome by everything that she's experienced with Gail and she's learned, she's kind of in the moment. She then gets a text on her phone that says, "Hey, when are your homecoming dresses coming in? I need to, get one." And so suddenly Sophia's like snaps back into reality. She's selling on eBay. And so she's staring at this 40s dress and she's like, She's in the scene, she's staring at the dress and she's got the scissors in her hand, and you know what's about to happen. She's about to desecrate this dress that this woman just left for her. And so she cuts it all up. And the next scene is you see Gail walking in her home. She's been outside. She's got tea in a vintage china. She's saying hello to the clothes in the closet that are all hung up in like cloth bags, and she's wishing them good morning. So then she goes to her computer, and what's interesting, she goes to her computer and she goes straight to Nasty Gal. Now this, I just have to pause here. This is so interesting because is there competition among resellers? That's a different podcast, right? The question is really, are you interested in what other people are doing enough to check them out and to watch and follow them? And obviously she was obsessed with Nasty Gal Vintage and what she was doing. So there she was logging onto her page. So all of us may have people logging onto our pages to see what we're doing, and we don't know about it. But anyway, so she was keeping tips on her competition, keeping abreast. And so she logged in, and the first thing up there was the dress that she had left her all cut up on bid. And she called it the Silk Cotton Candy Cocktail Frock, a dress everyone will be asking for the next dance, that kind of thing. And we know that Sophia loves to do really interesting titles and things like that. But right now the dress has no sleeves. She's cut the sleeves off, and it used to be long, and now it's like halfway above her knee. This pink dress has like a brown ribbon at the waist, and she's holding a simple flower in her hand. And in that moment, you see the character go, you know, be blank CH. So it's come full circle. Whoa. So yeah, that was the episode. One of my favorites. And there's just so much to learn. If you didn't watch another episode, you got to watch episode 7. So I just love this because, well, let's refrain and recount all of this. Like, what are my takeaways? Number 1, she's paying cash for everything. I want to emphasize that again because it was the one of the most important things that this character did to be profitable and have no debt, 0 debt. It's in her book. She did not have any debt. She would use her profits and buy more inventory and just let the profits stay in there. And we should all think about doing that. She was using cash. Cash is king. She was using cash and paying this one shop for the privilege to go through their things early. I mean, that's not a new concept in terms of people not talking about it before, but this is something that Nasty Gal did. Nasty Gal Vintage did this. She incentivized people to let her look at things first, and that's one way that she got things. And she paid cash for that privilege. She was on the lookout for interesting ways to get a lot of things, like the small theater that was closing where she bought the entire wardrobe. I think that's super creative. So number 1, cash is king. 2, building relationships. Having the relationship with Mobius helped her a couple of times in this episode. 1, to get the good stuff, and 2, to help develop this relationship and help this girl out who was into the debutante dress, Number 3, people have different motives for being resellers, and we have no idea what motivates someone to sell. And I think that to assume that everybody is selling because they're trying to build a multi-million-dollar company, I think is false. I think we're all selling for different reasons. Our passion for vintage is different. What we are selling is different. We are all drawn to certain things, certain garments, whether it's vintage or modern, like it's as varied as there are people on the planet. So we all have different motivations, and they're coming from a deep place. And I could do a whole podcast on what clothes mean to me, my relationship with my mother, my relationship with clothes, and my story will be like no one else's. And I absolutely have a bit of Gail in me and a bit of Sophia. I admit it. I mean, I admire these clothes. Like I have vintage pieces that it pains me to sell them. It's like, oh my gosh, I always said I wanted to find the person who'd pay a premium, and then I find them and they're paying me $1,500 for something, and I'm still like traumatized when I put it in the box, Yeah, and so I got a bit of Sophia and a bit of Gail in me. I admit it. I'm in love with the clothes. I know it, but I got to sell them. So, it's a drag too. But yet I love it when people get something great and look good in it and appreciate it. So there you have it. So yeah, relationships are all very different. Number 4, getting good press is amazing for your business because we can all have amazing stores out there. I would say maybe everyone who's listening has a terrific store that they're really proud of. But if people don't know about it, it's as if it doesn't exist. So if a tree falls in a forest and no one's there to hear it, did it make any noise, right? Press is really important, and that's a whole different podcast, is getting some press that we can talk about, which I will do. But right now, it's important to know that this press, she didn't ask for, she didn't solicit it. And let me tell you, some of the best press comes to you. She wasn't trying to be seen. She wasn't trying to be noticed. She was doing what she does, doing her thing. And it just happened that one or more customers had worked at Daily Candy. And they learned about her. She followed them. They bought her stuff. And they, on their own, thought it was worth raving about and telling people about. And that is huge, because when you start getting national press like that, it really does help take things to the next level. I think the next thing is you gotta be, if you're gonna be in the media and if you're gonna get recognized, you've got to be prepared for the fallout of that, and you have to be prepared that there will be people who are not going to be happy for your success. Like I said, this is my favorite episode. So much good stuff in here. So there were, for as many people who were proud of her and felt it was much deserved, there were a group of people who were against what she did so much that they put negative comments on the article. And sidebar, we have our own reseller drama in this community that does take place where these kinds of things do happen. It's kind of extraordinary, but it does. And so this is a really important thing to see play out. And whether you're a reseller or any other kind of business, is that there are people who are going to be thrilled for you. And there will always, I think, be hopefully a very tiny group that are not for your success. And they're going to make it known. And it's just unfortunate. But you have to take the good with the bad. And you've got to find a way to handle it. And just be like, okay, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. If someone's hating on me, I must be doing something right. And so she had to learn that lesson. I think another takeaway is that people are who they are. There were several very intimate moments where Gail and Sophia found a way to be vulnerable with each other and share very personal things about each other. And they found some common ground, which I thought was great, because I think everyone can find a place of commonality with people if they look. But these two very different people found some very common ground and opened up to each other about their mothers and things like that. Yet, in the end, they are exactly who they are and they're not going to change. And so the fact that in the end, Sophia was reminded that, business is first. She didn't know this woman come in her apartment, lay for that dress, fine, it's mine, I'm going to chop it up and sell it and move on with who I am and how I like to do things. And so it's a bit about being authentic to yourself, to your vision, how you want to run your business. And I thought that was such a great point, because there's nothing wrong with being who you are and having your own vision and just being strong in that. And it was easier in this episode for Sophia to be strong about who she was and her vision, because she was now successful. She was focused full time. The money's rolling in. Things are going well. She's getting her daily candy article. Things are rolling. I mean, people are liking what she's doing. It has momentum. And so she is in this moment very confident of what she's doing in her vision. And I think that's really, really important, to define your vision for yourself and stick to it. A lot of vision that I have for my JennieGirl brand is a lot more than what I'm doing now with it. And sometimes the bigger the vision, the easier it is, right? If your vision is too small, I think you can get tripped up. But I have a certain vision that I haven't fully executed, and I'm good with it. I'm good with where I kind of wanted to go, even though I'm not there yet. And it's nice to see someone else who had a vision stick to it, because if you stick with it, and this is another point, if you stick with what you're doing and do it consistently and do it well, you're going to grow and you're going to get noticed, because she was quality, she was unique, she gave personal touches to all of her packages, developed relationships with her client. You even see in one scene in this episode where someone writes a little note, "Thank you, nasty gal," and she writes them back. And it's like, oh, with X's and O's and glad you're happy kind of thing. So it just goes to show that she would respond to every email. She's very hands-on, developing those relationships, and that all pays off. And that consistent work that she put in every single day got her to this point. And she was recognized, not because she was jumping up and down going, "Look at me." There's a lot of that goes on, is look at me, look at me, look at me. You don't have to do that. Keep your head down, keep focused, do what you need to do, and you will be noticed. I love that. And that's it. That's the episode. This is one of my favorites. And so I love reviewing these. I will at the end, at the very, very end, after I go through all of them, I'm going to make a list of everything together, learn from each and every episode, because I think it's just so, so important. If you have not read the book, the Nasty Gal book called GirlBoss, I get nothing if you get the book. I'm just love it, just love the book. Such a great read. It's an easy read. You'll be highlighting things you want to remember. It's a great story and very accessible. And again, what I love about this story is that Sophia Amoroso was not some privileged debutante where somebody handed her a bunch of money to go build your company. She was scrappy and she didn't have anything, and she started it herself from scratch. And it just goes to show that, and that's what America's really all about. It's about overcoming whatever obstacles that you have to be successful, right? And that whole American dream thing. Well, she is the American dream. She made this happen for herself. That's to be admired. It's all hard work. Nobody handed her anything. We can all learn from her story. It's the best story out there right now. And I love talking about it. It gets me excited. So that's it. If you like the Nasty Gal story and the GirlBoss series on Netflix, I do have a petition on change.org that you can sign to get it on for a second season. I don't know how at this point so much time has passed. And of course, her whole life has changed since the series. But nonetheless, I think it's worth having more series on and more episodes, because it's a great story. And they need content on Netflix. So why not this one, You can sign the petition on change.org. There's a link to it on my Instagram profile at Jennie Girl's Closet. You can go straight to the petition and we'll get that going. We have not reached our first 100 yet, so we may never get there, who knows, but I'm having fun anyway. So that's there. If you want to be in touch, you can always email me or text me, or however that works on Instagram. You can always get me there, and I personally read all of that, just so you know, and be happy to answer any questions or whatever you have to be in touch about. I will be there to read it. Thank you for joining me. If you like what you heard, please give it a 5-star rating, maybe some positive comments. We don't want those comments that like Nasty Gal got. Some positive comments, some 5-star reviews go a long way. And of course, please subscribe to the podcast so that you can get notified every single time I do a new one. And that helps in the rankings, and it keeps me doing these because it makes me realize that someone's listening. I am, as of this episode, I'm at 40,000 streams and downloads on the podcast, and I'm working really hard to get to 50,000, and then of course will be the 100,000 be the next one. So that all helps by you sharing this podcast with others, by subscribing, and otherwise helping me get the word out, and hopefully you find it relevant and useful. And that's it. This is Jennie Walker with Closet Conversations, and I look forward to having you with me on a future episode. If you like the song you heard at the beginning, it's called Black Hat, written and recorded by Jennie Walker and Tommy Farragher. It's from the album Night Flight to London, which is available on iTunes worldwide now.